The North Smithfield Town Council, February 18th. We dispensing with the open forum since there was nobody here to present, so we will begin with the prayer and a pledge.
Lord, assist with thy Holy Spirit of counsel all those who are serving in positions of authority and responsibility.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can we do a roll call, Madam Clerk?
Ms. Alves?
Ms. Alves contacted me and she was not able to leave Boston, so she's stuck in Boston today.
Mr. McGee?
Here.
Mr. Yazbak? Here. Mr. Zwolenski? Mr. Flaherty?
Here. Before we get started, I just wanted to take a moment to recognize the fact that this community lost two people in the last week, tragic losses. One is Tom Fury, who served on the personnel board for a number of years, passed away, I believe, shoveling snow. And Mr. George Masutti, also on February 11th, well known throughout the Blackstone Valley for his work in academics and athletics, and both will be sorely missed. I'd just like to take a moment of silence, please. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda, we're actually going to be skipping executive session because it's not going to happen. The people needed to be here, couldn't be here. So we're going to move into the public hearing on the Public Facilities Advisory Task Force proposals. This is listed as discussion by council vote or other action on proposals. And before I invite RGB to step forward, I just wanted to provide a little background for those that aren't as familiar with it. So the Facilities Task Force was created by council resolution in May of 2013. Its purpose was to recommend three things: the highest and best use of all town-owned facilities, 2 is a capital improvement strategy and related timetable, and 3 is a responsible method for funding suggested improvements. The task force consists of 17 members, and I wanted to just take the opportunity to identify who those members were. I chaired it for the town council. Representing the town administrator was the town administrator. Representing the budget committee was Mr. John Zambrano. The Conservation Commission was represented by Mike Johnson. The Economic Development Commission represented by Rick Bellows. The Historic District Commission by Jeff Harris, who's here this evening. The Parks and Rec Commission by Mr. Mark Gagnon, who's also here this evening. The Planning Board was represented by Art Bassett. From the Public Safety Commission was Sean Russo. From the Redevelopment Agency was Scott Gibbs. From the School Committee was Mr. Connell, who's also here this evening. From the Sewer Commission was Mr. Winkleman, John Winkleman. The Zoning Board was Bill Jor. The Library Board of Trustees was Ken Thompson. The North Smithfield Fire and Rescue Service was represented by Brian Van Howe, who's also here with us this evening. The North Smithfield Police Department was represented by Chief Reynolds, and the North Smithfield School Superintendent was Mr. Lindberg, as well as the North Smithfield School Facilities Director, Tony Kopaz, who can't be here this evening because he's out dealing with snow for the school system. So these were 17 people that came from diverse stakeholder groups in the town to look at these issues, and we've been meeting since June. We started with a list of 17 buildings and properties, and we quickly narrowed the focus to 4 buildings that are in need of significant repair and reuse consideration. And those buildings were Town Hall, Kendall Dean, Bushy School, and the Andrews School. Additional consideration of solving the Hallowell problem and targeted renovations at the high school were also considered and a part of the plan. The review included all previously conducted research on space needs and capital improvement estimates. The task force retained RGB in November through a competitive bid process, and then over the ensuing 14 weeks worked with the task force in refining a preliminary proposal that comes before you tonight. The task force is scheduled to meet again on Wednesday the 26th so that we could hear what the public had to say, and then consider any modifications to the plan that may be necessary. And then the plan was to bring it back to the town council with a final recommendation on March 3rd. Given that we don't have a lot of public participation tonight, I think that we may be continuing this public hearing to the 3rd. I think we should still go through it even briefly with the council so that the council has sort of 2 bites at the apple, can ask some questions. But I don't think we can move forward on an investment this significant without having more public support. And frankly, this afternoon it was very difficult to tell whether we were going to be able to meet or not, whether the roads would be clear. So my thinking is that we'll continue, if it's the wish of the council, continue the public hearing after we've heard this tonight to March 3rd. Continue to solicit public input, then have the task force meet, consider any changes that may be warranted, and then forward a final recommendation to the council so that we can, if it's the wish of the council to submit legislation to the General Assembly to put it on the ballot for November, that we can do that. So with that as background, and unless anybody has any questions.
Mr. President, I was just wondering, could we put this on our website?
I think it already is.
This is not,
I-
it is, this presentation?
Yeah. Yep. See how efficient you are? It's already up there. It's already up there. So with that, I would invite Dave DeQuattro and Tracy Donnelly to give us the presentation.
Thank you. We have copies we can hand out to everyone for the presentation, so we can take something that's needed. The real presentation is you can ask questions during the presentation you want, and now at the end, and ask questions. There's a lot to absorb. Try to go through it. John, everyone can hear me, right? There's no issue with that. Because John mentioned the process of looking at the buildings. I also want to applaud the town and also the people that committed that work together. A lot of towns that I work in, they're usually fighting. They don't want to work together. You could have 2 buildings side by side. One would occupy the town, one would be the school, and they both have space for both of them. So this was really a great effort, and it's really opened my eyes to how the 2 entities can work together successfully. So I think this is a great approach. I'll go into basically a synopsis of what we did. Tracy can talk about the town buildings, and then I can go into the schools and what we did with that as far as consolidating that as well. We interviewed a lot of the people in the departments for the buildings to kind of get a grasp of what they needed. If you can imagine the house that you live in now, if someone came up to you and said, you're living in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, and we're going to bring the family next door and they're going to live with you. It may be a little bit of an issue about whose bathroom it is and whose bedroom they're using, and that's my closet, and you're going to use my garage. And so those things didn't even take place. I think what they did is they opened their eyes and their minds up to say, you have this much space, we can fit it in there. So when we did the plans, we came back, we met with them again to understand what their feelings were, and for them, that meaning the town employees and the school employees, to fully understand what spaces they had in and around and they felt comfortable with. So we made sure that everyone was comfortable with the space. We didn't push any space on anyone to see if we could do it and whatnot. So, I have a mind of its own. We looked at how we got here and the process going forward. So what this presentation represents is that process going forward. We looked at several floor plans of all the buildings around us, and as John had mentioned, we looked at the Bushy School, which occupies right now a town hall and a police station, and we looked at this building, Campbell Green, which is primarily used right now as a function meeting space, but also for school administration. The existing town hall, we looked at the Andrews School, which is on the corner where the middle school is now, at that use, but also looked at the consolidation of Hollowell, the elimination of some of the buildings there, consolidation of some of the grade, and I'll get into that in a second. Tracy, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about this process.
Sure. This is the lower level floor plan for the annex building. Right now, it's being utilized for some town offices as well as the police function for the town. In part of the consolidation, some of the town offices are also located in the town hall. We looked at consolidating those so that people in the town would only have to go to one location for all of the town offices. So that would be at Kendall Dean, which helped utilize some of the buildings, some of the space at the annex building for the police station. So right now, looked at more efficient layout for them. One of the other options was also bringing the court function over to this building. So the lower level was reconsolidated for the police function, and we added a small addition that consisted of one bay, sally port, and some processing cells for the police and processing function lab kind of space for them. As well as the EMA would take the lower level portion of the east side of the building. The first floor function was again redone. There's a small entry addition that was added that would have an elevator for accessibility, a more efficient layout for the police department, and then the court function above the EMA area.
Excuse me.
Mhm.
Is that an elevator for a car in the back?
No. In the back, on the lower level only, that is a sally port where the police would drive in a police vehicle if they had a person that was being detained. And
Yeah.
then they would bring them in directly into the police processing area and the cell holding area.
Oh, that's just a small elevator to bring them up in. Because there's another elevator.
I think that's
No,
elevation.
there's only one elevator.
That's ele-
Oh,
Yep.
is that elevation?
It's
Oh.
an ADA.
Oh, 'cause-
Oh, the elevation, because of the existing grading, we're gonna have a couple of interior ramps. We couldn't put the entire lower level at the same elevation because of the water flow around the building.
I just thought it was elevated because it's an elevator on the front one.
Yeah.
The front one is an elevator, so I said, is that another
Oh,
one?
okay.
There's an ADA
Yeah.
elevator down by what you would
Yeah,
consider
so-
the MAA
Right,
offices
so
to get
you
up and
just,
down.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a small lift that's in the EMA area now
Yeah.
that would remain,
Probably
would
doesn't
remain in
work.
that area because that
Does it work?
is a lower level, that's even lower than the bottom floor of that building.
Yeah, I just didn't know it. I saw something fancy. Guys, says, are we lifting cars up now?
No, we're not
Spinning
listening.
them around.
Okay.
No, it's just a garage. It's
Okay.
a one-bay garage. This is a site plan of the annex building to show how the police vehicles and the public vehicles for the court would be separated. Yeah, we have made one change to this plan that we haven't shown yet because it wasn't posted to the town's website. But we did put a 15-foot landscape buffer in the back of the site between the police and then the adjacent residents. Basically pushing the new driveway towards the police station a little bit.
That's where the little playground is that? where-
Yes, it is, yep.
And where would the new drive be roughly? There's,
The new drive is in the back of the lot where the existing playground is right now.
okay, there was an easement approved for sewer line back there about 8 years ago.
Okay.
I don't know if you picked that up or, Bob, I saw Mr. Erickson. Bob? You know, we had conversation about that
Yes.
easement.
Yes. Did I email you on that?
Not the sewer easement, you said that, there was,
Actually, Tracy found a map that showed Berry Field on one side and this on the other side is conservation easements, but they're not conservation easements. And you explained for sewer easements. And I conveyed the fact that you had to move that over because you don't want to do that to the neighbors.
correct.
Did we record the sewer easement though? I know it was granted by council. I just want to go on the record that I voted against
Yeah,
it.
we didn't
But-
find it. I can't have.
So if it's not recorded,
No, I can't have Connie do all that checking because she's overwhelmed right now.
I know. You gotta bear with me, I'm tired and cranky, and if I come across that way, that's not my intent. There was, in the previous council, someone who lives on the next, not Merrimack, what's the one on, to the north, the street over? Down at the bottom, there's like a white apartment house. A gentleman came before us and wanted to put an easement through the back of the playground, and I voted against it because it pretty much condemned our land for any development. If that has not been recorded, I don't know the legality of it. I mean, the sunset clause should have kicked in. If it hasn't been recorded, then we may still be able to do what we need back there.
Well, we don't want to, what they're doing and pushing it over has to be
About
done.
15 feet, right?
Yeah, it has to be done anyway, because you can't have the commercial which is really, you're looking at an impoundment area there that will have fatal wrecks from time to time.
Yep.
And you don't want to do that to the neighbors. So it's going to have to go over no matter what.
Okay, well, just be aware
But
that,
we'll try to identify exactly what the easement is.
okay.
Tracy, if I may, I know we had talked about on the right-hand side, I think, the cell tower and all the activity that goes on back there, and what, is that new drive, does that have anything to do with that? Or where's the cell tower in relation to this? I'm on my-
Yep, it's still in the same spot. It's in this location right here.
Okay.
It's fenced off.
Yeah.
One of the things right now is that the utility towers are accessed by private companies.
Right, and they're going through the back. of
And the
building.
only way they can pull their trucks up now is to go through the secure lot of the police.
Right.
So with this public lot, they can come in the back drive and pull right up next to the cell towers.
Oh, okay.
They will not have to go into the police gate to get to those towers.
Oh, that's much better.
So,
Thank you.
mhm.
Thanks.
Kendall Dean, the lower level, which would be primarily for town offices, building, zoning, planning, and some school department records in the existing location that they are now. Main level of Kendall Dean would also be for town offices. This room would remain as a meeting multifunction room. The stage area would be removed, and a conference room and a toilet room would be provided in the back of the room. There'd be a new entryway that leads to a public lobby and an elevator so that all three levels of the building could be handicap accessible. On this level is the town clerk, the vault, finance, taxes, and administration. And then the top level, the second floor would be exclusively school department functions.
We looked at the Hollowell building. One of the things we were additionally tasked for was to see if we can reduce or eliminate Hollowell buildings for functions. Move those students from Hollowell over to North Smithfield Elementary. Take the 5th grade out of North Smithfield Elementary, put them into the middle school, and then see if we can upgrade some of the science labs at the high school. So we did that. So these are all numbered 1 through 11. So the intent is to keep buildings 10 and 11. Those buildings are large span structures. They're in pretty good condition. There's some outside work that needs to be done. Each one of the buildings have their own boiler system and septic system. That would all remain for those 2 buildings. So we put some cost in demolition of those 1 through 9 buildings, capping the site, getting rid of the cesspools, making it safe, and then lumen seeding it. So, and then taking buildings 10 and 11 and bringing those up to code where you have right now holes in the doors and holes in the soffit through squirrels and whatnot, and basically conditioning those buildings with the heating system that exists now, tuning that up. And the school department would use those 2 buildings as storage, long-term and short-term storage. So as I mentioned, the middle school, we would take the 2nd floor and take the basically home ec space and convert that over to 2 5th grades, where they would then share the cafeteria, gym space, and some of the other functions in the middle school for the 5th grades. So we would consolidate 5th grade into the middle school, we'd move pre-K to grade 4 to the elementary school, and we'd put a small addition to the cafeteria, so you wouldn't have kids in North Smithfield Elementary School eating lunch at 9:30, so you need to the cafeteria for that. And then we would renovate the high school science labs and update some of the showers that existed since 1965 that haven't been renovated. So basically, just a facelift in those areas. And the science labs that exist now, the gas and water don't work, so we would upgrade those science labs to more 21st century type facilities to help the students for science and then getting into college. We looked at the town offices, like Tracy had mentioned, consolidating those. So the idea was to consolidate all this stuff as a town entity. We also looked at looking at modular type classrooms, because once you would bring the kids over from Hollowell into the elementary school, you have a need for 2 classroom spaces. So if you build them out of brick and mortar versus a type of modular building, the addition for the cafeteria would remain brick and mortar. I'm using the term brick and mortar, in other words, bricks, concrete, a building versus a modular building, which is like a trailer with wheels on it, and you bring them in there. So even with the trailer or the modular cost, the difference is that you still have to afford the utilities and the structure to connect these things that you would a brick and mortar building. So any kind of plumbing would still be connected to the sewer or whatnot, or the local septic system. What we did find out is that RIDE doesn't accept a modular for reimbursement. Right now, you get 40% reimbursement for any kind of school construction. That's a necessary school construction, not including the administration building. So by doing this addition, doing a bricks and mortar, you could take advantage of that 40% reimbursement. If you did a modular design, you wouldn't.
Dave?
Yes.
Do you get 40% on if we did consolidation in this building?
No.
Because it's not considered a school per se?
Correct. School administration is not.
So,
Why don't we, I want to just ask that we just hold questions until we get through I don't think there's that much left to the presentation.
This is right towards the end. So cost savings wise, we had to bring Hollowell up to fire code and life safety code, we had to at least invest $3 million into that building. To bring the entire building up to what they call current day elementary school, we would invest $12 million into that building. So by doing this, I think we've allocated $250,000 for demolition and renovation. 750 was demolition of the buildings and septic, and the 250 was upgrading some of the existing buildings 10 and 11 up to code standards and bringing the envelope up to building code standards. So like I said, we had 2 options. The thing here you got to look at is what's in green. That's the difference between one and the other. So we looked at the cost of renovations of the town buildings, consolidation of the town buildings, bringing everyone into Kendall Dean, and we also looked at the school department anticipated renovation costs, which we call option 1. This option 1 puts a brick and mortar classroom addition. Now it brings it down to a net of $2.9 million. So it was a lot higher, but once you gave the 40% reimbursement, it actually made it lower, which surprised us and everyone on the committee. So this option 2 here, which is the modular classrooms, would be a 3.3. So again, the difference being 2.9 and 3.3, about $400,000 difference. Now, a modular building is like your trailer, basically, and it'll last anywhere from 20 years to 25 years, and things start going wrong. They just fall apart at that point. That's why RIDE doesn't back them up with the reimbursement like a brick and mortar space. So we're adding 2 classrooms out of that. So this option 2, combined with the renovations that Tracy had talked about, comes up to a $10.6 million potential bond versus a $10.2 million in option 1. Obviously, the committee wanted to go with a lesser amount for the $10.2 million bond. So to recap, the elementary school we found more economically feasible with reimbursement would be a brick and mortar addition for 2 classrooms and a small addition for the cafeteria, about 1,300 square feet. Hollowell would be eliminated for all those buildings except for 2 buildings, which would be used for storage for the school department. The high school would have renovations to their science labs, were built in 1965, and the men's and ladies or girls and boys shower rooms, which we upgraded. New finishes, new shower heads, new control valves, new floors, we clean out the drains. The middle school would be converted with the least cost to house 2 classrooms for 5th grade. And that's it, that's our presentation. So with that, we can open up questions.
I'd like to just start with the council, administration, questions, clarifications.
There we go.
Pardon me?
Eddie, you want to go?
Go ahead.
Fine.
You're the cranky one.
Yeah, I am. I'm sorry. It's so out of character for me, isn't it? Andrew School and Town Hall. Any suggestions for Andrew School and Town Hall?
We had put money in that budget to basically secure the envelope of both buildings. I mean, I floated some ideas myself, like you could use the existing town hall. I know the town planner wanted to use it, possible government use, or federal government wanted to use it for a different use.
National
If that
parks or
wasn't-
something.
Yeah, if that wasn't use, you could convert it to condominiums and keep the outside by covenants the way it looks right now. The only reason why I push that way is it has limited parking. So you couldn't really use a bigger space, you would have to have an issue with parking down that, but you could use it for something like that. But in this dollar amount, we secured both buildings on the outside, so they wouldn't look dilapidated. Andrews School needed repointing, it needs windows, it needs doors. I think what's holding the brick together on that one is moss mortar, so it would be allocated to that.
Yeah, the plants and the gutters are holding that whole drainage system together.
Little additional insight on that question, Paul, is that the superintendent talked about the need for some storage, and obviously there's going to be a lot of storage at Hallowell if that part of it goes forward. They've currently got a lot of trailers in use at the high school, but I believe they rent.
Right.
They rent them. And so we looked at the cost of, okay, what if we just raised the Andrews School, which I know is, for a lot of people, it's a landmark, right? But I'm saying, so we looked at the cost to raise it, and if we built another storage structure of the same square footage, and it was about equal. So we said, if it's equal, then why don't we just contain the building envelope, and it can continue to be used for storage, but at least it won't be, blowing heat out the windows, and it'll be a more secure facility. As far as town hall goes, Congress hasn't acted on the national park, but we thought that in the interim period that right now there are boards and commissions that are using the lower level for meeting space, at least one of the sides.
Yep.
And we thought about fixing the envelope and then maybe doing some minor renovations to the first floor so that space could be utilized for boards and commissions, because it always seems like they're looking for spaces to meet. And then if something happens with the national park and the federal government wants to buy it or renovate it and do something else, then we'll have that option. I don't think anybody's going to be asking us to raise Memorial Town Hall. I can't see that happening.
Or Andrews School.
Or Andrews School.
You could put covenants on it and you could sell it, so they would have to keep the outside. Same with the Andrews School, you could lease that out and make a nice cafe, nice place to get a coffee.
Yeah.
Or the school cafe or whatnot.
Have to rezone it, but yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay,
Utilize
that's an
it for
idea.
revenue. Anyone else?
Tommy? Ed?
We only need 2 extra classrooms for 5th grade?
Yeah, because they're taking the 5th grade out, and then that's all they needed was those 2 classrooms. Hollowell would be 2 classrooms plus what's occupying the 5th grade, total of 4 classrooms. Yeah.
Can I ask you one question? On building 11 at Hallowell, why did you leave that one? Isn't that in the same shape as the rest of them?
It's similar, but it's in close proximity to building 10. So we toured that building with Tony Kopaz, and we looked at it. It was pretty minimal. We would gut the inside of it, with the core, and bathrooms.
But it's the same layout
Same
and
layout.
pattern. I just wondered why you would keep that one.
Just because we needed square footage, so we took the bigger space and we took one that was next to it. If you look at the proximity.
Yeah, I know it's close. I just didn't understand because I think that's as bad a shape as the rest of them.
Yeah, they're all. They got
just-
T111 on the outside, which needs to be taken
Wow.
off and a new skin applied.
And you're going to save the gym and it's going to be storage.
Yeah, it's a free span, nice span on the thing.
And then what happens with the rest of the property? What do we do with that?
It's open grassland. You
You
can, potential uses, fields, different buildings in the future, but it would be, what they call pad ready. So, in other words, all the cesspools would be cleaned out of there, all the building, all the hazardous material would be taken out. We'd reseed and replant grass.
Dave outlined some options that include, because of the layout and the configuration of the lots, it could be split. It does have its own ingress-egress to, I think, Green Street.
Yeah, when we looked at it years ago for a potential middle school site, that site is large enough, it's divided by wetlands, so you can have buildings on either side. And it's a great site because it still has access to sewer and has access to gas. It's very limited sites. We looked at the middle school, we looked at 32 sites for a middle school.
And I think that there was a consensus, I think, on the part of the task force, and anybody jump in and correct me, but that nobody thinks we need a new school today or in 5 years or maybe even in 10 years, but who's to say that we don't need one in 15, 20, or 25 years?
Right.
And so to have this property mothballed for future school use at some point would avoid the need to have to go out and try to find property that we don't own.
Which could be next one possible now, never mind 20, 30 years from now.
Right.
Yeah, makes sense.
Mr. President, may I just add?
Please.
Bill Connell, 29 Maple Avenue. Just the council, one of the things we looked at we looked a lot at different configurations. And one of the things that came out with this whole plan was that it manages to close down the Halliwell School and have the kids still in 3 different buildings, and yet it gives us flexibility. So that, and one of the things we want to do is be flexible. So it's a way to shut down the school and you still retain flexibility. Like I said, you still have the Halliwell property as there's a logic there to do with that. You don't have to do anything. Right now, there's no immediate plan for property. We have it there and we see where things go. There's a lot of talk about, well, where's the population going to go? Where's the student population going to go? This gives us flexibility without locking us into something long-term that, again, that we're committed to down the street. It's open. So it allows us to close the buildings, but again, it gives us some opportunity to do different things. And that's why we went with this composition.
So, if there's no questions further from the council, the administration, yes.
I just wanted to make one comment on the Royal Town Hall. There's going to be some tug back and forth between whether to put the main office in Smithfield, North Smithfield, or in Kentucky at the Slater Mill site. This is, think of this as...
For the national park you're talking about?
The Archipelago National Park, spots around here and there. Clearly, Slatersville is the #2 site after the Slater Mill. And Jan Reitzman, when he was at the Blacksburg River Valley Historic Quarter, definitely wanted it to be here. But we don't know what's the long-term solution. Even if the national park chose to locate at Pawtucket, that area of Town Hall and the 2 granite buildings would become much more into play commercially because of the additional number of people who would be coming here. And the 2 granite buildings have slightly more parking than they would need even if they were built out. And some of that could be brought over to compensate for the weakness, limited parking on the Town Hall site. People may not be aware that in 1994, the proposal was to redevelop those 2 granite buildings by putting infill in the middle and putting the elevator there so that you have full ADA compliance in both of those buildings, which would more than double the value of each if there were sufficient commercial activity to warrant that. And the national park is going to drive us in that direction. So no matter what happens, that town hall can be reused in constructive ways. They will all be mixed use in that area to give you, a number of options. But that's actually one of the brightest spots.
So, at this point, anybody would like to offer comment? Just, if you wouldn't mind, using the podium and just identifying yourself for the record.
Jeff Harris, 97 St. Paul Street. I just had a comment related to what Bob was saying, and in relation to what Paul was saying too, is that the town hall is already recognized as part of the Slatersville Historic District, as well as Kendall Dean School. So it's afforded some sort of layer of protection there anyway. The other question I had was for Dave. Does the 10.2, does that include the 40% or not?
The 10.2 is a net number. So it's greater than that, but once you get 40% reimbursement, it brings you down to 10.2.
Okay.
So our bond would be what?
Your bond would be for 10.2, because you get that reimbursement.
The reimbursement for not going with trailers.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, isn't it a when we have to pay it out and then be reimbursed during that next fiscal year? That's what we told the meeting recently. So I'm trying to figure out when we bring this to the voters, the 10.2 wouldn't be enough. We'd have to have.
What are the gross numbers?
Yeah.
10.4.
I don't know what happened on the middle school, it was a $30 million bond, and you got reimbursed for that 35% of that one.
We only get reimbursed for next fiscal year. So we pay the bond, P&I, and then the following year.
So, yeah, I
So we have to,
If you need a gross number, you go up for a bond.
right.
I mean, part of that campaign of selling that bond would be to describe what that 40% reimbursement is,
Mhm.
how much it is, how it's all characterized out.
And it only relates to the school.
School classroom buildings.
Class.
School construction, not school even administration building qualifies now.
Dave, just to clarify, that's just what DOE has to approve the reimbursement, obviously, but we would know that ahead of time. Is that-
We've met with Rod, and they've tentatively approved everything we're doing here, so they're in approval, so it's not a question at this point. Obviously, if funds don't become available with the state goes into a crisis, and that happens, and those things are, but the history of the state has never occurred.
The moratorium is still.
Moratorium is on
still
until this fiscal year begins in July, so depending on what they
What
switch
they
that up.
do, July 1.
However, this is a case where you're consolidating. Like I said, I've already met with Joe DeSilva, so he's behind it, so we can still go for that approval. This is a little different. This is not like we're adding additions because, we want to either improve the schools or we want to have a surplus of populations. This is a consolidation, which should save the money, the town money rather. So he's in approval now. And he knows the condition of Hollowell. So,
Mike Clifford, 489 Black Plain Road. I guess my question is about the reimbursement, because everything you read in the paper suggests that that freeze is on through 2015, and that there hasn't been a decision made to lift the freeze on school housing construction. And that if it is lifted, there may be conditions set to it. So are we automatically, you say you spoke to Joe DeSilva, and he's on board. Does Joe DeSilva control the pocketbook, or is that the General Assembly that's going to control the pocketbook?
There's a stage 1, stage 2, 3, and 4 process that goes through the new RIDE regulations. Where historically, let's say what we do with the middle school, you would submit an application, what we call now a stage 1 application, and they would approve it based on certain criteria. So once they put the moratorium in effect, you couldn't go for a new middle school unless there was a substantial need. In other words, if you had hundreds of kids that came into your community and there was nowhere else to put them, you had to do an analysis. Do I bus them over to Lincoln? The cost of busing them over to Lincoln was much more expensive than, say, Smithfield or North Smithfield. I had to split them, and you would have to have that need. So they came up with a moratorium that only life safety and CapEx projects would be acceptable. This being a CapEx type project where we're consolidating schools and we're closing the school that should be condemned for its quality and its surroundings has been accepted through RIDE. It's one of those criteria when you go through stage 1, 2, 3, 4.
So the money is there and there's no question of the fund?
Right, we would still need to go through stage 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll meet with the superintendent next week to discuss that stages. It's a paperwork type stage. So it takes anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks to go through stage 1 and 2. And then once you get approval from RIDE, you go to stage 3, which is construction documents out to bidding.
And they have a budget available for CapEx?
Yes.
Okay, that's not subject to the moratorium?
No.
Okay. Second question, how many classrooms are there currently at North Smithfield Elementary School that were built as classrooms? How many full-size classrooms are there?
I don't have that number right in front of me. I have to look that way. I would do their report. I have to look for that information.
Does anybody know that number?
I know the superintendent's here, right?
Well, I think that's kind of an important number to know, because I don't know how you determine that you need 4 more if we don't know how many classrooms are there currently that were built as classrooms but perhaps being used as other purposes. I went to the open house last year, and there were a number of classrooms that weren't being used, and a number of classrooms that were being used, it seems, for book storage and such. So last time this proposal came out, a year ago or 2 years ago, I was opposed to it because there hadn't been an assessment done of exactly what classroom space we currently have and how it's currently being used. I'd hate to see us build 4 new classrooms if we're using 3 as book rooms currently.
Well, we're only building 2 new classrooms, and you can't confuse, program with just fitting kids in a class. So you don't want to jeopardize your program, because that'll jeopardize your accreditation. So you want to look at your program requirements. We did sit down with the school administration, and they did tell us the numbers. I don't have a copy of all those numbers with me tonight, but the net of that was adding 2 classrooms to that elementary school. Taking those 2 classrooms that exist now in 5th grade and moving those to the middle school.
Okay, so you're only building 2 new classrooms at NEC.
And putting a small addition to the campus.
Okay, and that leads to my third question about the lunch period. I heard what Ms. Frame was talking about when she was referencing the problem with feeding the children and having to start so early in the morning. But I'm well aware of a number of elementary schools that have a much larger population and have overcome that problem just simply by the mechanism with the means by which they schedule the kids for lunch. Personally, I worked in an elementary, at a middle school with 750 kids, and we were able to cycle them through the lunch period within an hour and 22 minutes. Now, granted, they eat faster than younger children, but I don't know, I'd like to see the model that they use to serve the kids lunch, because there are a lot of elementary schools out there with larger populations that don't have this problem. So if we're adding on to the cafeteria simply because, and maybe that's not the only reason, but if we're just adding on to the cafeteria because it's a scheduling problem with getting kids to have to start so early and then end so late, I'm a little puzzled by that, given what I'm aware of in scheduling. So,
Do you have facts on what schools are doing it with the same square footage?
well, I think the superintendent at the last meeting said that he would speak with Carolyn and put her in touch with some schools that were larger. But like, for instance, and again, this is in the middle school level, not in elementary, but we found that by staggering the lunches, in other words, if you have, if your cafeteria can seat 200 kids, if you send all 200 kids in at the beginning of the lunch period, and you give them each 30 minutes for lunch, well, most of those kids, or a lot of those kids, are going to spend the full 20 of the 30 minutes in line at the hot lunch line. And that's why they need such a long lunch period, because it's processing through the lunch lines. But what we ended up doing was staggering the lunches, and we'd send them in, instead of filling the cafeteria instantly with 200 kids, we put 100 in to start the lunch. And then 15 minutes later, there would be no lunch line, and the second wave would come in. And by doing that, you're able to feed the kids much more efficient. It's a little like, quantitative analysis queuing, and that's exactly what it was.
Are you familiar with the way they feed the lunch in the?
No, that's what I'm asking.
So I'm going by what the superintendent tells us, his information, like any client would tell us. So I've got to imagine that the square footage of the existing cafeteria in Holloway is X, and the square footage in the cafeteria in the elementary school is Y. And if you combine the two, it would be X plus Y. So we're taking half of X and we're combining it with Y. So we're taking the cafeteria portion, the cooking portion out of that, and we're just doing the seating portion. And I'm pretty sure they use right now, they do have staggered lunches that they go in there. Again, the superintendent isn't here, he would probably be able to talk about that, but we were given that direction. It's 1,300 square feet, it's mostly used for seating arrangements. The intent is to use the same furniture from Hollowell, so we wouldn't have to buy new furniture. Right now, the food is cooked in the high school and trucked over and heated in the North Smith Elementary, so we wouldn't be adding any more kitchen. It'd be basically a space we would be adding to that space. So I'd be out of tune to start talking about how they organize their lunches in the time frame.
I'd just be curious to see how they are, whether she investigated that, because if the superintendent did suggest to her in the meetings publicly that he could put her in touch with other elementary schools and see how they did it.
What we will do, we're having another public meeting, I guess.
Yeah, I think we're going to continue this to the third.
Okay, great.
We can break them down.
I think it's a good question. I know Ms. Franklin talked about it. I mean, we spoke with all the principals. It's a good question. We'll get the information.
Dave, I have just a follow-up question on that, well, related to that subject. The more detailed breakdown that the task force reviewed, for option 1, permanent construction, it didn't actually identify the number of classrooms, but it did it by square footage. And the total square footage was 3,800. So divided by 2, which is 2 classrooms, that's about 1,900 per classroom. Is that about what?
Yeah, classrooms generally run to about $950 per classroom, plus you also have corridors,
Okay,
auxiliaries, type
Okay.
spaces that you have other than the actual classroom.
got it.
Larger classrooms for smaller, lower grade level, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
They range from 1,000 to 1,200 square feet.
Right, 12, okay.
At the next meeting, could we have the exact number of classrooms in each building that are being used, that were built as classrooms, and designate what they're being used for?
Sure. Yeah. You want total classrooms in the entire school?
Yes, for instance, I'd like to know,
How many is it?
elementary,
How many
are there
is it?
22
Sure.
rooms built as classrooms, and how many are currently being used as full-size classrooms, not for other services or, storage or anything like that, just a question. The second thing is, my last point, and I'll sit down before it, is I wish the committee would look at the last NESDIC enrollment projection and look at the state projection for enrollment that came out recently. If these projections are correct, and I know they weren't in the last year because of the Marshfield Commons coming online, but overall, this company that the school department does hire to do these enrollment projections has a very good history of being on target. Maybe not year to year, but at the end of the 10-year period, they usually come within 10% of what they project. And currently, the last projection that I was able to get a copy of from the school department was their projections for January of 2013, and they project by the year, the school year 22-23, there'll be 1,582 kids in our system, which is quite a substantial drop. So are we factoring in that if the state is correct in assuming that the enrollment is going to drop, and NESDIC is correct in assuming that the NESDIC enrollment is going to drop, is it the best idea to build classrooms if we're not going to be needing them? And I'm looking at this from a strictly a budget committee perspective. We're paying, they need more janitors, they need more custodial help. Do we now have some classroom space that we're not using as classroom space, but we're paying the maintenance of that classroom space? And are we going to be building and expanding and then having to carry the expense of maintaining rooms that maybe we didn't need? So I hope that your committee, Mr. Flaherty, looks at the NESDIC projections and the state projections that came out in that report a couple of weeks ago, and actually looks at the space currently that we have and how we're currently using that space. I'll sit down and be quiet. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Bill Connell, 29 Maple Avenue. Just wanted to kind of reiterate a couple of things and just expand briefly. Like with regard to Halliwell, it's a great map up there. So we are knocking down all the classrooms are there. For 10 and 11, I'll point out too, the flexibility we're talking about. Right now we're talking about use of storage, but that's not to say that, some option with that. Maybe we do use it as a community rec center down the road, or perhaps you talk about doing an alternate ed program. That could be a great location to do an alternate ed program. And an alternate ed program is the kind of program that can bring in not only service students from North Smithfield, but from students outside the area. And indeed, I'm an administrator myself, president, some of the members of the Budget Commission, and throughout, went to a seminar a few weeks ago, just hosted by RIAS, looking at the issues of a lot of what the same issues that we're looking at. That is population overall decline with some spikes here and there. And they're saying that's be creative. There's no one. I think you guys can correct me whatever if I'm wrong. I think they said there was no one clear answer. It's just be creative. But generally, the trend is to drive to a consolidation. And again, I think this plan is in compliance with that, and that it's a general consolidation. Yes, you're talking about losing all those, not losing, but knocking down all those classrooms. There is going to be a little surge. And I will tell you, initially, I was pushing more for the modular classrooms. But again, with the reimbursement, it winds up being cheaper. And the one thing Dave, Mr. DeQuattro, just elaborate on that. There is this, I know there was some questions raised about the reimbursement, but we will know, right? We will know it before the bond goes out if we have any issues with the reimbursement. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yes. So whatever's up in the air now, there is a little bit still up in the air, but before the bond, the key is before we commit to the bond, we'll know. And I think that's the key.
You do stage 1, you know within 4 weeks. When you go to stage 2, if they allow it. Stage 1 is an aerial view. You would have fly 30,000 feet over, and you give kind of a hypothetical situation. I think we've done that right here. Stage 2 is more in depth. We give more analytical, more calculative, suggested alternates of doing things and saving money. You'll know that within 6 to 8 weeks. So if we start stage 1 and 2, say March 1st, you'll know by May whether or not the meeting is going to have any life to it or not.
And we'll also know, if the General Assembly usually ends at the most by July 3rd, more or less. So we'll have before the bond comes out, we'll know if this plan looks feasible or if we've got a real problem with the reimbursement. So, at least as Dave said, unless there's a default that hasn't happened, before.
I'm working in 6 other communities right now doing the same thing, stage 1 and stage 2, and I've met with Joe Silver on every one of these communities, and I had his ear when we talked about this, so I'm pretty determined that it'll pass. He has to give his approval. He's already given me his verbal approval, and it is a one-person ride.
but they go by calculation, and this meets that criteria.
So I would just leave it to the council and also as we try to present it to the public, that we should look at it really hard and consider different things. But to me, the reason I like this and why I was opposed to building a new Halliwell, so to speak, is that I think it consolidates, but again, it still allows flexibility. To me, that's the two big components. Consolidates not just the schools, but the town buildings, other town buildings as well. It consolidates, and yet we still have space, we still have control of the buildings. It seems to me that it deals with the fact that population may go up, population may go down. It gives that flexibility, and that's to me what's the big piece of this. And it also, we get nice looking, not someone's going to come in here according to the plan, and it's going to be a whole different effect when you come into the council chambers, when you come into the offices. And that is going to be, well, hopefully that is going to make a difference, because we do want to attract more business. And I think that it's a whole nice combination, really, as Mr. Quattro said, of both the schools and the towns. Last thing I promised will step down. In 1999, I was part of something called the Blue Ribbon Commission, and we had a plan to try and.
I remember.
No, there was a there was a lot of way I didn't talk about going forward, and we had this commission, and a lot of people, a lot of feedback, and it just kind of, it was a good idea, but just nothing really happened from it. This is an actual plan with a, you can see where this is going. To me, it's very concrete, very tangible. So to me, this is like sort of taking the ideas of the Blue Ribbon Commission and really the shred that we had earlier, all the town boards and meet together, and trying to do some more things. Again, I keep saying 10 and 11. We can do things with 10 and 11 besides storage. It does, there are flexibility. That gym, maybe it becomes the alternate, maybe it becomes a rec center. It's still, we're not married to, storage, but that's the going plan right now.
Jim, if I may, I know this is premature, but if we were to take this area and we became the host for other out-of-district, our out-of-district needs, am I hearing that there's a potential here that this could be developed to alternative educational pieces, meaning our out-of-district kids could be stay right here in North Springfield, plus potentially bring in other out-of-district kids? Is this something that would be beneficial?
Sure. I don't want to commit. You can't commit to it, obviously. I can't commit to it myself, but I can say that we have looked at this issue, and that the idea has been discussed. So right now, that's the plan for it. But I'd like to see an alternate program doing just what you're saying, and Councilor Zawiski, and also there are other people who want to see that happen as well. And it's certainly we have the flexibility, the option of perhaps here, perhaps at one of the other schools. See, that's what I think is so nice about this, is that we're talking about cutting down buildings, but we're actually still going to have a lot of flexibility. And yes, that's certainly something I would like to see, a lot of people like to see.
Interesting. Thanks.
Thank you.
I got a quick question for you, Dave. Assuming that this goes before the public in November and they love the idea and they approve it, the timetable on town construction isn't as critical as the timetable on school construction, because you got to do it when they're not in session and so forth. So assuming that this were to get passed in November, is it feasible that in that following construction, well, the construction cycle begins like in April, but they wouldn't be able to do the work as the kids were in school until June? So would it be like, would the construction begin at the schools in, say, July through the following September? And is that enough time, or how would you see that happening?
Yeah, you'd stage it. I mean, you would start in March with kind of preliminary planning. You do some surveying and whatnot of the land. You could do that without interruption to the elementary school. And then as soon as the kids get out of June, you would start the hardcore, the actual foundation, the bricks and mortar. The idea is by September you get them up and ready to run. Whether or not they would be done in that time, the high school would be done, the middle school would be done. Would be just transferring and connecting that last stage of that elementary school down. And then last is we take it out.
Yeah.
This would be the last phase of it. So you do it in the phase type construction. This could occur in October, November, even December of taking the stuff down. And there wouldn't be any interruptions.
Right. Okay.
There's one other thing I wanted to mention. I mean, the gentleman got up and obviously he's worried about taxes. He's worried about rising costs. I think when you look at it, there is a consolidation going around. There will be a savings. Just utility bills and busing will be savings. There may not be a savings in teaching because it's the same students, but there'll be, your utility bills will go down and your busing will be different because it's all consolidated in one part. So there will be a cost savings generally. And I think when upgrading science labs that haven't been upgraded in 45 years, it's pretty inexpensive what you do, and you're tackling all the school buildings at the same time, you're looking at all the town buildings at the same time, and you're going out and you're solving all your problems. I think it's a great idea for the limited dollars you have going on for us.
Anybody else?
Mike Rappaport, 25 Old Greenville Road. We had this question up a couple months ago. Has the title to Kendall Dean been clarified? Is the way it's written is the school department controls this property. So the municipal side would need a letter from the school department allowing the town to move into the building because it's under the jurisdiction of the school department. I mean, there's no authority to move into this building.
Actually, we have looked at it. I know that this is something that was looked at several months ago, so I'm not as sharp on it, but my recollection is that there is in fact language in the handwritten deed that says that the building must be used for school purposes. School purposes are school administration. And my understanding also is that the town holds title to the property, but the property, as are all the schools, are in the care and custody of the school department. So I think that with that being said, and the fact that this group that came up with this recommendation included the superintendent, member of the school committee, and the school facilities task force, as well as the town administration, I don't see anything that would prevent the town from being able to move into the space, whether by deed or.
Caution to ask for a letter from the school department allowing the town to come into the building, renovate it, and share the expenses of the building in writing.
That's
so
a good
that
point.
if there's any title,
I think it's a great
title,
point.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
99 years.
Yeah.
When this goes out on the ballot, are these two bond amounts going to be kept separate, or are they going to be in one lump sum on the ballot for the taxpayer?
I think the way it's being proposed is for it to be one question, one lump sum, this is the package, unless there's some reason that we hear when we have a broader public input to the contrary. If people come out and say they hate one element of this and they can't support it, then it's up to the council to decide whether it wants to put it forward as one or two questions. But to this point, I think that if I understand the task force consensus to this point, it's to put forward one package.
All right, because I'm sure there are going to be taxpayers that have questions on the education side versus the municipal. I think we're all accustomed to the municipal by going to Bushy School, Town Hall, Kendall Dean. We know what the facilities look like. But a lot of taxpayers don't understand probably the school side of the. I hate to see the whole thing go down by putting it together. I think it should be a future discussion, maybe at the next meeting, that we should have a better discussion about whether it should be a single bond amount or two separate bond amounts. I'll get into some of the details of some other questions. There's a shortage of conference rooms to have public meetings for boards and commissions. The issue is you can't go into the middle school because they have to have a janitor. There's more expense in opening up certain buildings. Would this allow more conference room space for boards and commissions without incurring additional expense to have a janitor, to let people into the building, to shut the building down? Would the police department allow boards and commissions to go into the conference room to use that as a space for their meetings? I mean, right now we have to go to the fire department, or we have to go to town. We have to open up the town hall, and then we don't probably close it properly. There's no, so we do need more conference rooms.
Well, the net gain out of this plan is more space. If we do minor renovations to the first level of town hall, we pick up an additional conference room where the planning department is right now. We're already using what used to be the zoning office as a conference space. That's where the Economic Development Commission meets, where the Budget Committee meets, where the Redevelopment Agency meets. This room is used by a number of town organizations, obviously council, school committee, planning board. I think zoning board meets here. So I don't have an answer to your question about whether town boards and commissions would have access to the police department roll call room. I don't know. That question hasn't been asked. But I think that the space that we pick up at Town Hall, I think is probably going to be sufficient because it's one more meeting room than we currently have. And I don't think that it's a heavy lift that the organization that uses it, I mean, the budget committee uses it. Do you have a key
For what?
to get into Town Hall when you have?
Somebody has to unlock it, or
Yeah.
we usually meet them there.
Right, but without having, if town records were not stored on the second floor, and there was none of that there, I think then it would be much easier that for the board and commission chairs that are using it, to have a card, the door gets replaced with a higher tech door, you swipe it, you get in, you punch the code, you're out. I don't see, there's no risk of access to records that you shouldn't have access to.
During the discussion for the Bushy School to expand the police department, has any thought been given to combining dispatch between fire and police? You're creating a nice environment on the police side, but we don't seem to be talking about the fire side of it. Whether there's any cost savings to try to give them better service by putting it into the police department in a new environment?
I would defer to Brian for that question.
The fire department has looked at it with the police department years ago. I don't remember for sure, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And I know the conclusion, I wasn't part of that discussion, but I know the conclusion was that it really wasn't a wise idea to combine the two at the time. Whether that should be revisited or looked at.
The other question is, the New Darling Village is more fire calls in that part of the town. Has any thought with the extra room in the police department of maybe locating a rescue or splitting up, maybe moving some of the fire apparatus to that area as an alternative to the way that we have our fire districts set up now?
I mean, certainly there was the opportunity to have those discussions, but that's precisely the reason that we had a 17-member. It was difficult at times to coordinate because schedules and whatnot, but that was the reason we had all those folks at the table, because if the fire department saw that opportunity, then they had the chance to say, well, what about, what if we did this, what if we did that? I mean, we talked about the Andrews School as an example. Asked the police department, is there any interest in having that as a satellite office to cover the southern part of town, because you're way up in the northern part. And it wasn't sufficient enough. It wasn't important enough to them. They had an opportunity to influence and shape the floor plan as you've seen it tonight, and make sure that it's got all the components that are important to them. And the same is true of the fire departments. We said if there's a reason to be looking at the longer term, and we did. We had some discussions about, should it be relocated someplace else, and what about, response times and so forth. But there wasn't any consensus to make any changes with the fire department. Not that it wasn't considered or it wasn't asked. There just was no, and we weren't out looking for, we weren't saying, hey, we want to spend all this money, so tell us what your wish list is. It was just those things that were needs that rose to the top. We were able to address them. If they didn't come to the top as a need, then we weren't out looking for things to spend money on.
At least my next question, which I think you already talked about, the Andrews School would be a good substation. The fact that you have police cars right near the middle high school,
Yeah.
it's a great. How much would it cost to actually try to put a small amount of money into the Andrews building to have detectives or some patrol cars there as a satellite?
Chief didn't think that it was. It was.
But I mean, did he ask the public? I mean, maybe it's his opinion, but how about the public? I mean, the parents. Do they feel that this would be a wise investment to have extra security close to these schools?
No, I think that I was satisfied with hearing the police department's analysis of what their needs were, and there was no outreach to the public to say to the public, this is the opportunity for the public to say that we want to have a police presence at that school, and that's the best place for it. I mean, that's what this is for. And if there's enough people that share that feeling and that show up on the 3rd and express that, then the task force reconvenes and we consider the input that the public offered and say, do we want to modify the plan? And if 50 people show up and say, we want to have a police substation there, then we reconvene as a task force and say to the chief, a lot of people want to have a substation there. Do we need to rework this plan to account for it, and how much is it going to increase the total cost by? But that's how we've approached it.
At the next meeting, would you invite the fire chief and the police chief? So if there's questions about, have they resolved all the fire issues for the next 10 years, that there's not going to be any need?
Well, Brian is a representative of the fire department. He's here this evening. Everybody, in fact, everybody who's here, sitting here, is on the task force. The invitation went to all the task force members, but again, I realize that A, inclement weather, B, anytime we have a meeting, you're never going to be able to get everybody at the same meeting, but everybody has been active at one time or another, and we went through a period of several weeks where we were just bantering on these very questions. So it's not as if there wasn't an opportunity for people to say, oh yeah, you know what, we really need this, we need that. I mean, that time has occurred, and I just had no interest in going out and manufacturing things beyond what was brought forward through the task force. I wasn't looking to create, more building or more expense. It was a chance. Everyone knew throughout the whole several-week process that this is our bite at the apple. We're not coming back to the town in 5 years or 10 years or maybe even 15 years to say we want to take on all this major capital improvement. Everybody was made very aware of the fact that this was their opportunity to raise their hand if they had something that needed to get done for their organization.
The last question, is there a fallback plan if the taxpayers don't approve this bond, whether it's on the municipal side or on the school side?
No. There's no fallback plan.
This is it.
This is it. And what I said is, I want to get the right people assembled to have this discussion, to come up with a plan, and it's a well-thought plan. It's got what I think is a reasonable price tag associated with it, and we put it before the public. And if the public doesn't want to support it, then we've given the public the best opportunity to address all these concerns. And then we say, then we live with this the way that it is, and we live with the configuration of the other buildings the way that they are. That's just the way it is.
How many more meetings are planned to talk about this issue? Is it going to be next meeting is the final meeting, or an additional meeting?
I'm going to propose that we continue this meeting to March 3rd, so that we can engage more of the public, because obviously the snow had an impact on attendance. This was originally scheduled weeks ago, and it continued to get postponed, which I didn't want to have to postpone it again. But we'll continue it to the 3rd if everybody agrees, and we'll promote it again through the newspaper and get folks to turn out and tell us what they like and what they don't like. And if there's enough stuff that they don't like, then the task force will reconvene after that and consider whether it needs to modify it, whether it's a police substation or whatever the interest is. We'll consider it before we send a final recommendation to the council. And then I would hope that by March 17th, that the council will make a decision about what they want to put before the voters in November. Because we have missed the deadline of submitting legislation. I know we can still get legislation submitted past February 14th, but I don't want to test it all the way through till May or June.
Right, so right now, the plan is March 3rd is the final
Public hearing.
Public hearing.
Unless the council decides it wants to continue it beyond March 3rd. But I would like to see March 3rd be the final public hearing, have the task force convene after that, make any adjustments that it determines are warranted, and then get a recommendation back to the council for the 17th.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else who wants to speak that hasn't been heard from yet?
Art Bassett, Form RAF. I want to make a point, and I hope people see the big picture. I know it's easy, especially with issues of late, to get bogged down in bits and pieces. Like, you're a smarter guy than I am on a lot of this stuff. I want to know the answers to what you're asking, but I don't want to stall this. Because that is more of what I would call an operational question. Is the school running efficiently? And that's what we're going to get, hopefully, out of whatever audit comes out of things. The big selling point for this, it follows the Hallowell issue. I've been here about a dozen years. Hallowell's been a thorn in this town's side as long as I've been here. My daughter went there for 1 year. Thank God it wasn't longer. The place is a disaster. It should have been torn down then. I know there may be some folks who went there and have an emotional attachment. But just looking at it from a money perspective, just looking at it from a capital investment perspective, this plan sells itself on what we save on Hallowell. And that's what did it for me, and that's what got me on board from a taxpayer angle. I don't want the additional taxes. I don't want to see another bond floated. But I also don't want to be nickel and dime for the next 4, 5, 6 years and spending 12 more on a facility everyone knows is defunct. So that's what sells it, and I think that is the biggest. And Dave, kudos to you for putting it right in the slideshow. 12 more million over what, 4 years? That's craziness. So I'm hoping this is the nut that finally does it and kills off that issue for the town, because it has been a big deal. It also has a benefit. There's some additional savings that you're going to see. I think, I don't know what those are, but it eliminates some capital improvement items that have also been on. We've been hearing about science labs. Do I want the kids to have to do something? Of course I do. Everybody does. We want the best education for the kids we have in town. But I don't want to pay for them. Nobody else wants to pay for them. My kids are out of school. And I'm frankly at the point where I'd like to see no more investment. But that's unrealistic. So this, again, hopefully this is the nut that pulls it all together, gives us a final solution for the police department gets a great facility. Do they need it? Yeah, they need it. The town offices get a great facility. The first 3 years I was here, I couldn't figure out which building I had to go to. It wasn't until I got involved in town politics that I went, all right, now I get where everything is. Otherwise, I'd drive to one, show, what do you mean, this is town hall, I can't do it here. And they had to drive the other end of town, honestly. And taking time off work to do it. So there's some good consolidation here. There's some good answers to a lot of capital needs that we frankly aren't going to go away. And if we don't get this through, and we don't figure out a way to pull this together for the town, I don't know. Future town councils, future budget committees, it's going to be a nightmare pulling all these individual line items together to do something to solve the big problems that we have. So I just want to kind of caution folks to keep an eye on the big picture, keep an eye on what this does and what this gets us, and not forget about the little things. But 2 more classrooms, great. If that's what it takes to solve it for now, terrific. Are they running efficiently? Who knows? Figure it out in the next one. This gets us a lot more than it loses us. So, we get bogged down in the minutiae sometimes. So let's not get bogged down in the issues. I have one more point, it's escaping me now. Oh, Dave, actually you made it. The efficiency issues that we're going to see. Closing down how? The busing. No, whether you'll have more busing costs from this end of town, who knows? But keeping the lights on there, you're going to save there. You're going to save on constant fixing of facilities, cleaning of facilities there. I think it's a win-win. So that's I kind of jumped around there, but I think we need to keep an eye on the big picture, make sure that we sell this as a plan that saves the town money. Really save us money over a very short period of time. Frankly, for capital investment of this size, you're going to see the return on this in a matter of 3 or 4 years.
Thank you. Any other task force members that want to be heard before people get a second chance? Mr. Erickson?
I just want to make a comment on Kendall Dean. Dave, could you put up the first floor? we could see that that configuration for this space would allow a small meeting and a large meeting to go on at the same time. Or it could be the executive session for the area for the school committee or the town council with the other boards. Almost never go into executive session. And if you look at where that elevator is, the idea of running an elevator that can hit all 4 levels and has 2 doors is really ingenious. It solved a lot of problems in the building. So my hat's off to Tracy and Dave for figuring that one out. And then the key to making this work is that the bottom floor comes into play. That is remarkably good space. To break the ice, I volunteered to go into the south end of the bottom space for the planning office. And then everybody said, well, if he's down there, it's a good place. But you can just get so much more out of this building by using the bottom, and that's the key to making it all work. I was planning director in Dartmouth when they were using, and still do, use a converted school. We had all wood floors. It was a beautiful conversion. And that was the single most important economic development tool that we had. That when somebody was coming into town to invest, they had great faith that this town knew what it was doing. Okay? You don't get that same impact when you have cheap carpets glued to wood floors that have just been mopped. So, you know, I can tell you the level of response I got from investors in Dartmouth versus here. You know, I get to the end of the meeting sometimes and it was like, why are you here? I said, well, you got to meet Paul at Hamilton. But this is going to solve a lot of problems for a lot of people. And I'm really, it's one of the joys that planners have, being involved in this kind of process.
You know, and I didn't mention you as you weren't technically a member of the task force, but you probably attended as many meetings as most task force members.
I had the most fun.
And you had a lot of input, and we appreciate that.
I'll just issue a disclaimer before this starts feeling here. My comments about the lunch period were not in any way, shape, or form directed at questioning Mrs. Frain's ability to schedule a lunchroom. Okay, it was basically because of the conversation that I heard happening at the January 6th meeting in the exchange between the superintendent and Mrs. Frain. Because when she read the concerns about the lunch period, he pointed out to her that there may be other ways to schedule lunches, and I'll show you those schools. So I don't want anybody saying that I didn't think Carolyn was going to take out scheduling lunches. Known her for 50 years, very nice woman. I really like her. So I didn't want anybody to leave with that impression. Okay, so it's just, was the follow through there? Did we ascertain that you truly need the space? And that's my concern. Second thing was with regard to what Mr. Repko was saying about the school department giving permission and signing off for the use of Pendleton as a joint facility. I was at one of their meetings, and I thought they had it on the agenda as an item on the agenda to agree to the proposal and that the concept that they would use this as a joint municipal center and school department administration building. And I thought they did not take a vote on it that night because the comment was made that they didn't want to do that, that you know, conceptually they were in agreement, but they wouldn't go out on a limb and take that vote because if the bond issue failed, then they might need the space. So, Mr. Conlon, you were at the meeting. Was my recollection incorrect or correct? You didn't vote on that, did you?
I never we actually made a formal vote on it, but sure, like you said, Mike, in concept, yeah, the school committee definitely supports this. The idea was just that if for some reason this, let's say this went forward and it fell through, then we want to perhaps move on to Kendall Dean. And again, I'm not saying that this would happen, but there was a question asked about an option plan. This building could be used, you know, in theory, for classrooms down the road, if, you know, if the other situation went through. I almost hesitate to say that because that's not the plan that's on the table, but certainly this is the plan that we have on the table. So that's all that means. But in terms of getting the permission from the, in terms of getting whatever authority we need from the school committee to make sure the timing issue is finally got to Kendall Dean, I can say on behalf of the school committee, as far as this goes, that would be a problem. Whatever you need, a letter, resolution, whatever you need.
I agree with Mr. Rapco. Why can't we get that in writing now rather than later? Because there's always issues later.
I'd like to see it tied up like Guantanamo Bay, 99 years.
Yeah, yeah. But
But
could
I
they
think-
put that on the agenda again and vote to, take an actual vote and agree that, yes, this can be used, it will be used as a municipal center? Because otherwise, you're kind of caught in keeping this as one big package of referendum. Because if you separate the issues and one doesn't, the school issue fails and they won't relinquish title to this building, then everything goes down the tubes. And on the state referendums, they never combine the transportation bonds with the URI bonds. So, and I, as a taxpayer, would like the option to say yes to this one and no to that one. Maybe I don't want to take on $10 million in debt. Maybe I'm more comfortable with 8 or 7 or 6. I'm going to know how that's going to impact my taxes. And that's a consideration that I should have an option as a voter to.
Well, I do think that one thing that we said from the beginning of the task force is that we wanted to put forward a comprehensive solution to the town that addressed municipal and school space needs. And I think that personally, my preference would be to keep it as one single package, because if only one part of the package happens, it then doesn't address the whole thing. We still have significant issues to deal with. So again, if there's an overwhelming vote of support from the public when we meet on the 3rd that they don't want to do that, then I think we have that discussion.
Well, can you at least ask the school committee to put it on their agenda again and take an action on it?
Sure.
So that everybody knows in advance that it's okay?
Yeah, can that come through Paulette? I mean, let's have that happen tomorrow.
So, I'm sorry, so a request to school committee for the next agenda, place on the agenda a request for permission.
Consideration of allowing, municipality and schools to use Kendall.
A letter of support that they agree to having
with a time attached to it.
Having the town and the school in the same under the same roof.
Mr. President, I think Bill has sort of made an if-then situation. So if you want to say that if the bond is passed, we will agree to do this, this, and this, to share the building.
No, I think we should have that in order before we go for a bond. Wait, yeah, Mr. Connell, you'll take care of that, right? I mean, and Paulette, it might be a conciliatory move between council and school committee to start.
No, but I think I certainly will speak to everybody, I'll speak to the superintendent, I have to go, be aware of open meetings issues. But with regard to that, I'm just going to speak for myself right now. I, again, reiterate, it was discussed, and I think the committee did say yes, that, in favor of the concept, but, I want to think this through a little bit more, but I would like to see the option, for example, if this went through, I wouldn't want to see the option of the school be lost. In other words, I just include this about voting in separate pieces. There may be a situation where some people want to vote in pieces. I tend to lean more with the president in terms of putting it all together. I think you lose some of the benefits if we do it in pieces. One thing I would hate to see happen is lose the opportunity. For example, if we weren't going to do anything with Halliwell, well, let me rephrase that. If we weren't going to use this plan to Halliwell, it'd be nice to see this building still available, because the issues that we have with Halliwell, which the plot to explain, and everyone knows, the issues with Halliwell still exist. I mean, something should be done with Halliwell regardless. So, I'm not trying to hit the circles. I just think that we're giving. I'll get in front of you for you. We'll do something. But I do want to really convey though that the school committee is behind this plan. I want to make that very clear. That the support is not tentative. The committee is behind this plan.
It looks like a complete package, and if we start taking pieces off of it, it won't be complete. And I don't think we're going to serve the needs of our community. So I like what I'm hearing tonight, and I've been following it. So I certainly would support this, and hopefully we can just have a municipal building that houses school and municipal side. It's just it's progress.
Yeah, and I want to reiterate, I'm not criticizing or questioning the whole package, but I personally think that it works best. The whole effect is achieved by the whole package. This is what we feel. If people feel differently, we'll start to be on it. Thanks for the vote on it.
But Paula, can you still, with Mr. Connell and get two people working, coming in from two, triangulated fire, and maybe we'll hit a target?
But if I may, just to clarify, you're looking for a letter of support and an agreement to utilize this building for municipal and school facilities, or something to that effect,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Mr. President, that doesn't deal with the issue that Bill raised about what happens if it doesn't pass.
Then we worry about it, yeah.
Okay, but one of the nice things about packaging all together public facilities, I mean, there's no school buses in this, it's all public facilities. The nice thing about doing that is that a lot of the capital needs that the school department has are in this package. And they would absolutely be slitting their throat if they didn't agree on Kendall Dean. And if that came up during the run-up to the voting on it, and people said, I'm not gonna vote for it because the school department hasn't agreed, or the school committee hasn't agreed, I can't imagine them wanting to do that. Isn't there a question?
I don't, that was, Mike broached the subject, but if I can, Mike, the way I would look at this from a negative side, and I don't like to go to the dark side, but you may have taxpayers that say, why are we gonna approve it if the municipal side can't use it? We're just putting more money into the school. So if we tie it up where it's gonna be used municipal as well as educational in school, and also because of whatever the lease was written as, this has to be used as an educational facility or some type of school facility, it just makes sense to me. I think if we had just proposed it to the school committee saying, the public hearing, Public Facilities Advisory Task Force, here it is, this is what we would like to accomplish, can we tie it up, will these buildings be used for municipal and school? I think that's what Mike was getting at, Mike Rapko was getting at this whole
I'll tell you why I'm not concerned about it, because when this goes to the voters, it's on as a ballot question. It says, do you want to spend $10.2 million to facilitate this plan? The plan is known, and if the voters speak, then we all as a community have an obligation to fulfill that if they say yes, they want to pass it. So I'm less concerned about it, but I'm happy to
I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. And the taxpayer is paying a tax rate. And whether the capital goes to the municipal side or the capital goes to the school side, they're paying taxes. And we're looking for economies of scale here. I just think that the point was brought up that this building we would like to have an agreement that says, yes, it's going to be used for municipal and for school. It just takes that argument away. We won't even let it build traction in the public.
I just think that it may make it more complicated than it really is.
I think it makes it more solid, John.
Okay.
I just think it ties up some loose ends, but I don't know.
Okay. Well,
it wasn't my idea. Who was that? Was that Rapko?
Mr. McGee.
I just wanted to ask Dave one question. We have a heating system that we put like $85,000 to upgrade this one in Kendall Dean right now. I think that's what we have.
Yeah.
Is that included? You're saying that that's included, or did you figure another one?
It's included.
That's included. So you took our 85 and put it into this one.
Correct.
And will that system that we're using here going to be all right with the AC that you guys figured? You wouldn't want to go to something different from what we figured already?
We've got more price, this is very preliminary, Tom, so it's based on a square footage price, but there's more VAV components. Individual control.
I just wanted to make sure you knew we didn't throw away money here, and maybe if we're going with AC, we might do something else.
Right.
That's all. I just wanted to say that. Okay, thank you.
Mr. President, you're speccing the heating system based on the new heat load of the revised envelope. So you're actually going to gain something. If you just put in a boiler now to handle what we have here,
Right.
you'd be paying a lot more money than if you put in a smaller boiler to handle the new heat load once we get all the windows in and all the
Right.
openings.
Okay, final comment. Okay.
I just have as a taxpayer, I want to know if is there some kind of rough estimate or even close estimate as to, this is going to be a question that's going to come up because it's only us who's here. How much is this going to cost me?
Mm-hmm.
I need to know that.
Yeah. Yep. It's a question that we've discussed, and we were going to have that be part of the presentation this evening. And I thought maybe we would have that for the public next time, but if the town finance director would like to weigh in on this, I have spoken with the administrator about being able to communicate to people, you know, a couple things. Number one is, how does $10 million break out in a payment over X number of years? And then also look at a 5-year revenue forecast, because folks will remember that we've exceeded the state mandated cap last year, and that resulted in lowering the tax burden for residents across the board, which is not always a bad thing. But to the extent that that debt service is exempt from the levy cap, part of that could be recouped through growth that we have in the pipeline, and then you would also be prepared at some point to say this would cost the average homeowner X dollars on their bill. So with that, I will turn it to the finance director.
Okay, we did contact Steve Massaroni's office so he could get us a breakdown for the $10 million. He gave us 3 different years. For a 20-year, it would be about $770,000 a year. For 25 years, it would be about $705,000 a year. And for a 30-year bond, it would be about $685,000 a year. We did ask the assessor to give us a 5-year. She didn't finish the whole 5 years, but within the next year, next 3 years, we do have growth within Darwin Village of Coles, Petco, Firestone, Aspen Dental, and Walgreens, Versus Street. So far, they have 20 permits this year for new construction for homes, which he said will average about $320,000 tax increase, plus the motor vehicles for those homes. She figured about 2 cars per home. And we could get additional funds if we lowered the motor vehicle excise exemption, which this year is at $675. It is state mandated for $500 exemption. So even if we went to $575, which would bring the exemption down a little bit, it would increase our tax by about $859,000. So we would definitely be over our cap, so we would have enough to be able to help cover the debt payment.
Without increasing the tax rate specifically for this.
Correct.
Right. That I would hope is going to get fleshed out in a little bit more detail in time for the March 3rd hearing, and maybe we can even have something printed up on a single sheet of paper that describes that.
Mr. President, the other thing you would need is your thought sequence, what comes online, what comes offline.
Yeah.
And so you'll know what that is.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe we could even have a slide or two for the next meeting that we could put up so that for the benefit of folks. Okay.
If I could just ask a question, if in packaging and/or presenting those figures, and maybe no one else thinks like me, but maybe they do, but I think they probably do. I'm already at a point with the excise tax. As long as I live in this town, I'll never buy a new vehicle. Because of that. Let's not try and increase that and say, we're going to screw you, you're going to pay a year. Let's present it more positively as opposed to looking at the excise tax. I think that's a bad way to go about it, that's all.
I would tend to agree. It's a concern.
I'm still holding on to that 1999 vehicle.
99, I got 97. Okay. I'd like to try to move things along. Madam Administrator.
I just want to make a quick question about the elementary school septic system that we have on here. I thought it was under capacity significantly already.
The North Smithfield Elementary?
Yes.
We've allocated $125,000 as allowance to either add on or provide another field in the area.
Okay, and that would be required, because I always thought that it was under significantly.
No, it
It's
isn't.
not being utilized enough, as Mr. Lindbergh is known to say, those little things don't flush enough.
Right.
So.
It's not underutilized according to DEM standards, it is what it is. and we could go for a variance, but there's a process for that. We'd have to get 3 years of bills to substantiate the lack of use. So they don't typically grant variances for that, but we would try to
That
find
would
that,
be
but
something that could look into.
during when the process starts, we would do
Right,
that
right.
first.
So I would entertain a motion to continue this public hearing to March 3rd. Moved by Councilor McGee, seconded by Councilor Zulinski. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? March 3rd it is. Thank you very much for being here, Tracy and Dave. A good presentation. And I think that I'm probably going to cancel the tentative placeholder date for the task force on the 26th because I don't know that we have enough feedback to reconvene the task force and consider changes. So I'll send an email out with some other dates. Okay, next item on the agenda is discussion by council vote or other action on consent agenda. All items listed in this section are considered in one motion. There'll be no separate discussion of these items unless the council so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda. Are there any, is there a motion on the consent agenda?
Motion to move payment of bills.
Okay, motion to move payment of bills. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor McGee. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Anything else? Hearing none, is there a motion to accept the remainder of the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Moved by Councilor Yazbak. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor McGee. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. McGee?
Yes.
Mr. Yazbak?
Yes.
Mr. Zelinski?
Yes.
Mr. Flaherty?
Yes, motion carries. And that brings us to discussion by council vote or other action on specific items removed from consent agenda. Payment of bills.
I'm abstaining.
Oh, is that why you moved it? Okay. That's standard, right?
That's standard.
All right. Mr. President, under advice of the town administrator and the town finance director, I make a motion to approve the suppliers invoice approval list amount of total March payments of $2,118,849.30.
Motion by Councilor Zulinski. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor McGee. Is there any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. McGee?
Yes.
Mr. Zelinski?
Yes.
Mr. Flaherty?
Yes. Motion carries. On to item number 9, old business. Discussion by council vote or other action on additional wireless facility on Comstock Road water tower. This is listed as an authorization for signature. Mrs. Hamilton.
So this has been on for a little while. If you recall, the last time we brought this up, I was waiting for a response back, and I did receive it. Basically, what we are invited